I'll move on to the investigation now. I can tell you that in October of 2021, members of the York Regional Police Guns, Gang, and Drug Enforcement Unit began investigating an individual who we believe was involved in the trafficking of cocaine and fentanyl. As the investigation began to progress, we identified a fairly robust criminal network surrounding this specific individual, who we believe were also involved in the distribution of controlled substances, as well as firearms. Firearms that we believe, drugs that we believe were being trafficked here in York Region and across the GTA. As such, we formed a joint forces operation with the partners you see here today, dubbed Project Monarch. As the investigation began to evolve, we identified a suspect in the London area who we believe was involved in illicitly importing firearms into Canada from the United States. We believe that one of the points of entry for these smuggled firearms was Walpole Island. Walpole Island is a First Nations community in Western Ontario. It borders Port Huron, Michigan, and is separated by the St. Clair River. This is a channel of water that acts as an international boundary between Canada and the United States. We continue to work closely with Walpole Island and their chief and council to ensure that their community also remains safe and secure. As you can see, Chief Charles Sampson has joined us here today from Walpole Island, and you'll be hearing from him shortly. On July 28th, a number of Controlled Drugs and Substances Act search warrants were executed, as well as criminal code search warrants. These search warrants were executed across Brampton, Toronto, and the London area. Over the span of the 10-month investigation, we executed a total of 22 search warrants at residences, 19 vehicles, and 2 businesses. Ultimately, the final results are as follows. We arrested 22 people. We laid over 400 charges. And if you can see on the charge list, if it's been distributed already, dozens and dozens of firearm trafficking-related offenses, as well as drug trafficking-related offenses, and an individual who was charged with conspiring to import firearms into Canada. We seized 27 handguns, 17 prohibited magazines, over 300 rounds of ammunition, approximately 9 kilograms of cocaine, 1.5 kilograms of fentanyl, over 20,000 Xanax pills, a quantity of heroin, and 41.5 pounds of cannabis. A total street value that we believe is worth approximately $1.3 million. We're also alleging that we seized offense-related property in the form of 5 vehicles and over $155,000 in Canadian currency and $9,000 in US dollars. In relation to the 27 seized firearms, I can tell you that a number of them had their serial number obliterated or altered. This is a common technique that's employed by criminals to prevent law enforcement from successfully tracing the point of origin. As the deputy indicated, 20 out of the 27 firearms have been traced to the United States, including Florida, Ohio, and Michigan. And we believe that the balance of those firearms, the 7 remaining, will also be traced to the United States. You also know that dangerous drugs can have an irreparable harm on our communities, specifically those that are most vulnerable. One of the disturbing pieces of evidence that we identified was large quantities of fentanyl that was seized that were pressed in the form of pills to appear like candy, whether it be a car or a butterfly or a variety of other things. If you can imagine a young child or even an adult accidentally consuming what they believe to be candy, I can assure you that the result would most definitely be fatal. Ultimately, this investigation has dismantled a sophisticated criminal network involved in the distribution of cocaine, fentanyl, and other controlled substances. We identified a criminal pipeline that we believe was responsible for the flow of illicit firearms coming into Canada from the United States. Firearms that we believe were destined to the hands of violent gang members and other violent offenders. I'll conclude by saying this. Our communities deserve to feel safe. York Regional Police and its partners recognize the devastating impact that guns, gangs, and drugs have on our communities, not just here locally in York Region, but provincially and nationally. We recognize that the combination of firearms and drugs can often lead to violence, and that any time we can seize a firearm, we are confident that we are saving a life and that we're enhancing public safety. And finally, thank you again to the investigative team who worked tirelessly for 10 months. Thank you for your dedication, your sacrifice, and for keeping our communities safe through your excellence in policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector. Next is Peel Regional Police Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich, Deputy Chief of Investigative and Emergency Services. Deputy.
Thank you, and good afternoon. On behalf of Peel Regional Police, it is a pleasure to join my York, London, Ontario Provincial Police, and Walpole Island colleagues. To start, I would also like to thank all of the partners, including Canadian Border Services, the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario, Homeland Security Investigations, and all of our partners for their collaboration on Project Monarch. As important, and perhaps more importantly, I would like to thank the investigative team that's responsible for these results, the team that delivered these results. Every one of these illegal firearms that you see before you here today represents a life saved and the prevention of further harm and victimization to our communities. Illegal firearms are a priority for the Peel Regional Police Service and every service you see here represented today. In Peel, roughly half of our homicides can be attributed to illegal firearms. This is not a concern that is exclusive to Peel. It is an issue that affects all of our communities, extending well beyond the boundaries of Peel and across the province and the country. And as we see here today, because of that, an effective response requires this type of collaboration. And this is why our police service and the police services you see here today are so committed to cross-jurisdictional collaboration, joint forces operations, and specific investigations targeting illegal firearms. Along with participation in projects like Project Monarch, the Peel Regional Police will continue to invest in a variety of programs and strategies intended to address gun violence. Those strategies cannot be enforcement alone and cannot be exclusively driven by police. It requires collaboration with community partners, leaders, and stakeholders to get more illegal firearms off the street and prevent people from engaging in this type of activity. Our service continues to work closely with a variety of partners, policing, multi-sector partners, in order to address gun crime. An example of that would be our Strategic Tactical Enforcement Policing Unit. This unit is dedicated to gang suppression, strengthening enforcement, and gathering stronger intelligence, not only for benefits in Peel, but across the GTA and throughout the province. And we are seeing results. In 2022, we have seized 90 illegal firearms from the street. If you include the firearms that have been seized here today, that represents an illegal firearm taken from the street almost every other day. While this makes a difference, and those benefits can't be denied for our community, it also demonstrates how important it is that we continue with this collaboration and continue to invest in gang and gun violence as a priority, not just in Peel, but across the policing sector. Again, I would like to thank York Regional Police and Deputy Bigrath for their leadership and hosting us here today. We appreciate the opportunity to work closely with our partners and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Deputy. Please welcome Ontario Provincial Police Chief Superintendent Paul Mackey of the Organized Crime Enforcement Bureau in the Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit. Chief Superintendent.
Thank you, Deputy Milinovich, and thank you, York Regional Police, for coordinating this important announcement. On behalf of Commissioner Thomas Creek and the members of the Ontario Provincial Police, we've been pleased to assist York Regional Police with Project Monarch. Putting a stop to the criminal activities of gangs and their associates would not have been possible without the seamless collaboration between our provincial, national, and international partners. As you may know, in November of 2021, the Government of Ontario announced an investment of $75.1 million towards the fight against gun and gang violence in Ontario. As part of this investment, the OPP is leading a Guns and Gangs Joint Forces operation consisting of members of 22 police services across our province. This funding has also enhanced the OPP-led Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit to better support specialized gun and gang investigations, such as Project Monarch. The Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit plays an integral role in identifying and taking enforcement action against those involved in the trafficking of firearms, ammunition, and explosives. The Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit also assists in the identification, testing, and verification of seized firearms with the assistance from the Firearms Analysis and Tracing Enforcement Program, managed by the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario. The Firearms Analysis and Tracing Enforcement Program traces the origin and conducts analysis on the crime guns recovered in Ontario. The firearms seized in this investigation are crime guns. To explain further, a crime gun is a firearm used in a criminal offense intended to be used for criminal activity, has a removed or damaged serial number, or is a weapon that's been adapted to be used as a firearm. These are not firearms that have been legally obtained by responsible gun owners. They are firearms obtained illegally with the intent to be used in criminal offenses. It is imperative that information be shared across our borders to advance firearms-related investigations and ultimately aim to prevent the importation and trafficking of these crime guns. The Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit maintains a close working relationship with law enforcement in the United States, with a member from the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives embedded in the unit. Law enforcement will continue to collectively work together to combat these organized crime groups who are exploiting our communities and compromising the safety and security of our residents. I know I speak on behalf of all the partners represented here today when I say that guns and gangs are absolutely not welcome in our communities, and we will strive to do everything possible to eradicate their presence and all the associated criminality. Thank you.
Thank you. Now from the London Police Service, Deputy Chief of Operations, Stuart Betts. Deputy.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you all for being here today. I'd also like to thank Inspector Cherney, who joins me, as he represents the men and women of London Police Service who are engaged in the day-to-day activity related to the enforcement for the type of behavior you see here in this type of a result. Projects the size and scope of Project Monarch simply cannot happen without a strong collaborative effort. And I would like to publicly extend my appreciation and thanks to all the agencies involved, but also to Chief Sampson and his community for their support in helping us to eradicate this problem. The City of London is not immune to the violence and presence of firearms and illegal substances. And the reality is, there are criminal organizations that operate within our city. Their activities are a danger to our community. It goes without saying that criminal organizations do not restrict their criminal enterprise to the geographic boundaries drawn on maps. Strategically focused, multi-jurisdictional enforcement with agencies from across the province and beyond that are focused on combating this borderless criminal activity is required to keep our communities safe. Make no mistake, firearms are finding their way into the hands of those who would use them for criminal purpose. And all too often, this is in relation to organized crime with devastating consequences. The London Police Service frequently collaborates with other police agencies to identify, deter, and suppress the criminal actions of those who would seek to harm those in our community. We have been a long-standing partner in the area of intelligence gathering and strategic enforcement with organizations such as the Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit, the OPP Organized Crime Enforcement Bureau, the Biker Enforcement Unit, and are pleased to be a participant in the OPP's Provincial Gun and Gang Task Force. As Ontario's 10th largest municipal police service and being situated along the 401 corridor in southwestern Ontario, our participation in these enforcement efforts is of significant importance as we're committed to contributing to a safer Ontario. The prevalence of firearms obtained through illegal means, many of which are brought into this country unlawfully, is a serious concern. These firearms are invariably instruments of death and destruction, devastating families and shattering communities. The City of London typically averages 15 shootings per year, and while not as many as larger communities, even one is too many. And in 2021, we experienced a 5-year high of 28 shootings. Sadly, we're on pace to equal or exceed that number this year. It's a disturbing trend, and it's unfolding across the province. Our gun and gang section is mandated to investigate the firearms and gang-related activities, and as of July 31st this year, they've already seized 35 illegal firearms, 17 of which were handguns, with frontline officers seizing many, many more. This exceeds the number of illegal firearms seized in our city in all of 2021. Being located along the 401 corridor, as I've mentioned, and halfway between the GTA and the US border cities, it presents a geographically attractive area for criminal groups to utilize our city for their illegal activities, something that's not lost on the members of our organization, all of whom are committed to keeping London safe, and in so doing, are often able to interdict and disrupt the activities of those who would seek to venture further into the heart of the GTA. We will continue to work with and partner with other police agencies, intelligence agencies, to disrupt this criminal behavior within our city and beyond our borders. Project Monarch is an excellent example of such collaboration, and the outcome, such as what you're hearing and seeing here today, is the result. Again, I would also like to thank the many officers and the support staff behind the scenes of all of our agencies, all of whom work together to bring this project to a successful conclusion. There's more work to be done in our fight to keep our communities safe, but we are committed to contributing to a safer Ontario. And as I said earlier, I would like to wind my speaker notes down by specifically thanking and extending that heartfelt thanks to Chief Sampson and his community for their support in this ongoing effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Now for our last speaker, Walpole Island First Nation Chief Charles Sampson. Chief.
Bonjour and good morning, everyone. First, I would like to acknowledge the efforts and coordination of Superintendent McIntyre and Inspector Ahmed. And Achimi Gwetch, thank you for the invitation to attend and participate in this newsworthy event, dealing with the rewards of effective policing in the fight against organized crime. There is much to be done. I also want to acknowledge the outstanding efforts of all the officers and police services involved with this operation. Your efforts and hard work are to be commended. There are long hours that have been spent in this investigation and a lot of hard work, and I think the boots on the ground should be acknowledged and forms of appreciation should be extended to them. I want to say, indeed, it is time to take collective police action to prevent serious crimes within our communities and to stop the flow of dangerous weapons and firearms through First Nation territories. These illegal weapons ultimately assist with the commitment of crime in large urban areas such as Toronto and present a real danger to public safety and to human lives. As the leader of a First Nation, I want to take the necessary steps to protect my people. To do this, I understand our police service must work with surrounding police agencies to effectively do the job. I also understand we need to work on a collective strategy with defined objectives to meet the goals we identify. To do this, the Walpole Island Police Services requires adequate resources to implement their part in the overall plan. An effective plan requires resources. And like all First Nation Police Services Ontario, we need physical resources to do the job in terms of cars, equipments, boats to protect the border. We need human resources to do the job. We need trained individuals and capacity building in terms of investigations and undercover work. And most importantly, we need adequate immediate financial resources to build a foundation for our policing services. We need those resources immediately. Our police service is terribly underfunded. We only have about 9 to 11 officers in the field, and we have to protect a border, an international border between Canada and the United States. Our islands are large, and they're situated in the St. Clair River. We have one boat. What we need is a whole Marine division to do the job effectively, and to do that, we need the financial resources. I now say this to the Premier, Premier Ford, and to Prime Minister Trudeau. Open up your considerations to flow the necessary, adequate financial resources to get this job done. First Nation Police Services want to be effective policing within our territories and within the province of Ontario. We desperately need adequate enhanced funding to get this job done. In closing, First Nation governments, like all responsible governments, believe in peace, order, and good government. Ladies and gentlemen, we need the financial resources to get this job done, and I am making that demand to the federal and provincial governments to adequately resource First Nation policing services, to work hand in hand with our partners to combat crime. We have to take these guns off the streets. We have to prevent the flow of illicit drugs into our communities, and we have to deal with human trafficking, and we have to deal with something that is close to my heart, and that is the missing and murdered Indigenous women and children and girls from our communities. Chimigwech, everyone, and I hope this message gets out to the federal and provincial governments. We need the assistance, and we need it now. Chimigwech.
Thank you. We would be pleased to take questions now. Please indicate who your question is for, and they will make their way to the podium.
Thank you. That's some great police work. Many of you talked about the importance of collaboration. So can you kind of address that again, how important it is to share information with other police services?
Thank you. I can address that question. The sharing of information and working together in partnerships is key for law enforcement and our community partners to tackle these issues. Our brainstorming, our thinking, our ability to share resources, break down the jurisdictional boundaries, the ability to access resources on a moment's notice in London or on Walpole Island by way of a phone call, a text, an email. There's a number of ways that makes us more efficient. Sharing of information, we all have officers dedicated to working on the street as well as in the back room where they're collecting information in a number of varied ways, and the ability to pick up the phone, talk to someone, call someone, and to ensure that we're working together is paramount. And the ability at each and every different time, I would say that the ability of any service individually is taxed in different ways. So at certain times we can step up and assist in a way that is needed where resources might be short in another jurisdiction. So we truly work as partners. We truly work in a way that allows us to focus on the overall commitment to public safety above and beyond everything else.
Thank you. My follow-up would be, are your investigators finding that handguns are the predominant weapon of choice? And clearly this is a strong message to criminal organizations who are wanting to smuggle guns into.
I would say absolutely at this point in time, handguns are a real concern specific to here in York Region, specific to here in the Greater Toronto Area. Handguns, you have the ability to covertly hide, put in your pockets, hide somewhere in the vehicle. It's a much easier weapon to access, unfortunately.
I just have a question about the fentanyl that was pressed to look like candy. Just if you could maybe describe why that is. Is it pressed to look like candy as a way to disguise it, so maybe it'll try to go unnoticed? What is the purpose?
I apologize, I can't hear anything.
I have a question about the fentanyl that is pressed to look like candy. And just maybe if you could talk about why that's done. Is that done to try to disguise it, to make it look like something that's not drugs, and sort of what the method of that is?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a number of reasons for it. My personal opinion on that is anything that you can make that makes it a little more appealing, a little less looking like a poison or something that's going to hurt you, might entice someone to take it. As well as would say there's oftentimes criminal organizations like to brand their product so that their product becomes a desired product on the street and is known. So there's a number of reasons. I can leave it to someone else if they want to expand a little bit further, but I think that pretty much addresses that question.
Can you tell me how it all happened? Did it come across the river in a boat?
Yeah, so for the investigative details, I'm going to turn it over to Inspector Salia, but I would say traditionally firearms are smuggled through air, land, and sea, and in this specific case, we believe that the weapons were smuggled in across the water. But
Can you talk about that a little bit? How did it happen at night? Was it a long trip across the lake or the river? Give me some details, paint a picture, please.
I will turn it over to Inspector Salia to come up, and if he's able to answer the question, the investigation is before the courts, so what he is able to answer, I will turn it over to him to answer portions of that.
Yeah, as a deputy indicated, we're limited to some of the answers that we can provide. This is obviously still before the courts, but I'll draw your attention. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the media reel. There was actually an image there that shows the separation between Walpole Island and Port Huron. That's the body of water at the St. Clair River. I believe at its narrowest point, it's under a kilometer wide, and we believe and we allege that some of the smuggling that was taking place at that island was happening across the river. The method of entry I won't necessarily get into, but that is the point of entry.
Was it where motorboats, canoes?
Again, I won't comment on that. I can just tell you that the point of entry is as described.
There was a case recently of a drone that was found with guns up in a tree. Any indication, I think it wasn't that far from this location, any indication that this is connected?
I can tell you that that's unrelated to this investigation.
And are these all intercepted at once, or were they coming across different voyages?
No, so the firearms were not intercepted at once. There are a number of them that were seized in bulk, and there were a number of firearms that were seized in the execution of search warrants at some of the offenders' locations.
My question for Chief Sexton.
First, thank you for the question. The the negative impact that these activities had on our community has been very alarming. With the influx of illicit drugs within and through our community to other points in Ontario, there is a residual amount that stays within our community. And that has really presented harm to individuals. We have made great efforts to not only bust the drug houses, but we're also looking at ways and means of providing treatment services for those individuals that are affected by the drugs. It's one thing to catch the bad guys, but you have to remember that there's always victims on the street, and we look at ways and means of providing those services to rehabilitate them and to get them purposeful and meaningful jobs back within the community to help with the restoration processes that are necessary. And a lot of that involves looking back at traditional teachings and to really understand, I guess, what it means to be community and how an individual fits within the community itself there. And with human trafficking, that is another very alarming activity in and around our waters. I have to point out again that we are surrounded by water and we have very, very limited resources to patrol our territorial waters. And what I need is the financial assistance from the federal and provincial governments to beef up my services, my police service, to do the job. And to do that effectively, what I'm going to require is a whole Marine division. If you have a police service with one boat and miles and miles and miles of coastline and marshes and hunting grounds where there are many places to hide, it becomes a very daunting job to try and tackle. So there are a number of activities we're looking at in terms of cooperative efforts with the police services in our area to tackle those issues, and the development of continuing strategies to deal with the bad guys and get them off the street is in the works.
Any other questions? Okay, that concludes the formal portion of the news conference. The speakers will be available for one-on-one interviews. Should you need assistance at all, you can approach myself or our other media relations officer, Constable Beneva Armstrong, over to the left of the room here to your right. Thank you very much for attending today.